This PowerPoint is presented by Clement Etoke and Constance Ambele. Frederick Douglass was chosen as a character of interest. Who was Frederick Douglass? He was the son of a slave woman and an unknown white man. Douglass was initially called Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, and he was born in 1818 on Maryland's Eastern Shore. He spent his early years with his grandparents and an aunt. He was 7 and saw his mother only 4 or 5 times before her death. Douglass only knew that his father was a white. Frederick Douglass and slavery. During the time he was exposed to the degradations of slavery, witnessing first-hand brutal whippings and spending much time in the cold and hungry. When he was 8, he was sent to Baltimore to live with a ship carpenter by name Hugh Old, where he learned to read and first heard the words abolition and abolitionist. Going to live at Baltimore, Douglass would later say, laid the foundation and opened the gateway to all my subsequent prosperity. Douglass' accomplishments. Frederick Douglass has been called the father of the civil rights movement, who rose through determination, brilliance, and eloquence to shape the American nation. He was an abolitionist, human rights and women's rights activist, orator, author, journalist, publisher, and social reformer. Douglass was committed to the freedom of enslaved blacks, and he dedicated his life to achieving justice for all Americans, in particular African Americans, women, and minority groups. He envisioned America as an inclusive nation strengthened by diversity and free of discrimination. Douglass served as advisor to presidents. Abraham Lincoln referred to him as the most meritorious man of the 19th century. In his later years, he was appointed to several offices. He served as U.S. Marshal of the District of Columbia during Rutherford B. Hayes' administration, and President James Garfield appointed him the District of Columbia Recorder of Deeds. In 1889, President Benjamin Harrison appointed him to be the U.S. Minister to Haiti. He was later appointed by President Grant to serve as Secretary of the Commission of Santo Domingo. Douglass had hoped that his appointments would open doors for other African Americans, but it was many years before he would follow in his footsteps. Frederick Douglass' path to emancipation. Frederick Douglass rose from slavery to become the leading African American voice of the 19th century. At an early age, he realized that his ability to read was the key to freedom. All of his efforts henceforth focused on achieving freedom. As a young man, he came into contact with black preachers and taught in the Sabbath school in Baltimore. There in Baltimore, he refined his reading, writing, and speaking skills. Douglass' marriage. At age 20, Douglass escaped north to freedom. He settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts, with his wife Anne Murray Douglass, and joined the abolitionist movement. Douglass, the abolitionist. Frederick Douglass was a compelling force in the anti-slavery movement. A man of moral authority, Douglass developed into a charismatic public speaker. Prominent abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison recognized his oratory skill and hired him as a speaker for the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. Douglass, the abolitionist. Douglass worked with many notable abolitionists of the 19th century, including Wendell Phillips and Abby Kelly. He also had a close relationship with John Brown and his family, but disagreed with Brown's violent tactics, dramatically displayed in Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. With the abolishment of slavery at the close of the Civil War, Douglass then turned his attention to the full integration of the African American into political and economic life of the United States. Douglass established his own weekly abolitionist newspaper, the North Star, that became a major voice of African Americans' opinion. Later, through his periodical titled The Douglass Monthly, he recruited black Union soldiers for the African Americans' 54th Massachusetts Volunteers. His sons, Lewis and Charles, both served in this regiment and saw combat. Douglass worked to retain the hard-won advances of African Americans. However, the progress made during Reconstruction soon eroded as the 20th century approached. Douglass spent his last years opposing lynching and supporting the rights of women. The anti-slavery crusade of the early 19th century served as a training ground for the women's suffrage movement. Douglass actively supported the women's rights movement, yet he believed black men should receive suffrage first. Demonstrating his support for women's rights, Douglass participated in the first feminist convention at Seneca Falls in July of 1848, where he was largely responsible for passage of the motion to support female suffrage. Together with abolitionist and feminist Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Douglass signed the Declaration of Sentiments that became the movement's manifesto. His masthead of his newspaper, the North Star, once read, "Right is of no sex, truth is of no color." A women's rights activist to the end, Douglass died in February of 1895 after just having attended a Women's Council meeting. Why we chose Frederick Douglass? We chose Frederick Douglass because of his work on the freedom of African Americans and for his work on women's rights. One of his famous quotes that we really loved is, Douglass once quoted, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will." Frederick Douglass. Here you find our works cited on the next slide of this PowerPoint. Thank you.